Hi everyone. Before we jump into today's episode, I want to take a moment to give a shout out to my amazing Supercast subscribers. Your continued support means the world to me. As a Supercast member, you get exclusive access to the unfiltered, ad-free video versions of our Health Unchained interviews, raw, real, and packed with insights. You're not just supporting the show, you're fueling the conversations at the cutting edge of healthcare and blockchain innovation. So thank you for being a vital part of this journey. If you're interested in joining, you can learn more about Supercast in the episode description.
Hi, I'm your host, Ray Dogan, and welcome to Health Unchained. On this show, I will be speaking with healthcare entrepreneurs, thought leaders, and executives who are using blockchain technologies to revolutionize healthcare. These innovators are building the distributed infrastructure and diverse communities required for a trusted, secure, and decentralized healthcare ecosystem. Enjoy the show.
What is blockchain?
Was ist Blockchain?
What is blockchain?
The doctor will see you now.
Remember, the Health Unchained podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only, and we are not providing any sort of legal, financial, or medical advice. Please do your own research and due diligence before making any important decisions related to these matters. And now, please enjoy episode 122 of Health Unchained.
Welcome to Health Unchained, where we explore the transformative intersection of healthcare, life sciences, blockchain, and other emerging technologies. Today, we're thrilled to host Casper Barnes, co-founder and CEO of AminoChain, which is a DeSci company focused on connecting worldwide inventories of biosamples and research data to power the next generation of preclinical research economies. Casper, welcome to the show. I'm really excited to have you here and chatting with you about biobanking and the next revolution here. So why don't you start by introducing yourself a little bit to the community?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, Red. It's a pleasure to be here. By way of quick introduction, my name is Caspar, and I am the co-founder and the CEO of AminoChain. I'm originally from Cape Town, South Africa, and that's why I've got this funny accent. Grew up in Cape Town and then in the United Kingdom. I did my undergraduate degree in economics and neuroscience in London. Spent a few years working in financial sales in London, and then did a graduate degree in management and finance at London Business School. Moved over to the United States around 3 years ago to do my graduate degree in biotech. Spent some time working in B-cell lymphoma research at the Columbia Irving Medical Center. Founded AminoChain around 2 years ago off the back of an accelerator program in New York called Antler. And ever since then, I've been building a product that's been pretty widely adopted and has been growing quite nicely. And so I'm very happy to talk a little bit more about that today.
That's fantastic, and congratulations on your early success so far. So, you mentioned some of your previous history. What got you interested in doing DeSci stuff? Like, maybe we can start with what do you think DeSci is, and then what got you so involved here?
Yeah, it's a really great point. So there's many different elements and layers to my story about how I got into the DeSci space in particular, but then also within the biobanking space, and why I think that blockchain is a really good emerging technology that could be applied quite nicely to the space of biobanking. So first of all, on the idea of DeSci is the concept of decentralized science. It's the idea of using blockchain technologies or blockchain protocol infrastructures to power citizen-led science, or to power effectively scientific applications, communities, platforms that enable things to operate in a streamlined fashion without the control centralized intermediaries. And so if you think about the world of science and healthcare as it exists today, there's a lot of centralized actors that suck out the value of what scientists are trying to do within the community, right? So the idea of publishing, for example, that's controlled by a few big journals. The idea of funding, that's definitely controlled by a few big pharmaceutical developers. And we see a similar sort of space in the world of biobanking, where donated biosamples and data are used for the benefits of downstream researchers, but leave out equitable benefits for the patients and research participants that make all this research possible. And so we see blockchain as a technology that can bring a lot of that equitable benefit back to patients and to level the playing field and to create more sustainable biobanking ecosystems into the future. And I'm happy to tap into all the different elements and levels in which we do that. And my personal space, my journey, and like how I got into this, right? So less, an interest in blockchain technology itself. I was actually more of a scientist and somebody that was interested in biology from a very young age. But my personal story is that I moved to Cape Town, South Africa when I was 6 months old with my mom and my older sister. And my mom started a charity called Yabonga, which helps women with HIV and AIDS get access to antiretroviral treatments. and provides homeschooling support towards the kids in the townships that live just outside of the cities. And so growing up, I spent my weekends in and out of the townships playing with kids that were my age. And so we had very regular discussions around race, around privilege, around equity and access, and especially in post-apartheid South Africa, right? There was always a big emphasis on understanding, why do we live in this area of town? Why do others live in this area of town? What's the importance of giving back throughout your careers? And so that has always been a very big familial and cultural value of mine that's now playing into the vision of what we're building within AminoChain with an aspect of health equity. And the second thing that happened was when I was 12 years old, I had something called a malignant melanoma, which is an aggressive type of skin cancer. And I was very lucky because it was caught super early. So I just needed one big operation to remove the tumor. But that experience threw me into the world of healthcare from a very young age, right? So I remember being a 12-year-old kid, listening to these doctors explain the concepts of a healthy cell and a malignant cell, and how cancer spread. And as a 12-year-old, I listened with wide-eyed fascination. I just became in love with biology from that very moment. And I was like, I have to work in medicine in some capacity. And so since that very moment, I've been obsessed with biology. At the age of 16, spent my summers working in oncolytic viral vector research, ended up doing my undergrad degree in neuroscience, did a graduate degree in biotech, and currently doing another master's degree in bioethics at Harvard Medical School. So I've always been obsessed with biology from a very young age. And the key thing is that I can still remember waking up from this melanoma surgery where the doctor was standing over my bed and she was holding the biopsy sample. And he was like, check it out. This is what we cut out through your back. And then me as a kid, I was like, oh, that's so cool. Can I take it home? I have to show my friends at school. They're not going to believe this. And the doctor was a bit facetious. He was like, no, we have to keep it here and we have to study how these things spread. And so I was too young to understand the ethical connotations of what was going on. But the important thing is my mom was presented with a consent document. And she said, sure, this is for the good of science. Let's sign this piece of paper, hand over the sample. And then we never saw it again. And many, many years later, when I was at Columbia and I was working in B-cell lymphoma research, I was quite literally in the lab holding somebody else's sample. And then it hit me. I was like, this is insane. This belongs to a human being. I'm here in the lab generating so much information on them and their condition, and they have no idea what I'm doing with their biosample. And that blew my mind. I asked my principal investigator, I said, can we tell the patient about the research that we're doing here? And she said, it just came from the biobank. I have no idea where that thing came. And that really blew my mind, right? The provenance trail of biosamples, the equitable benefit of downstream uses of these samples in research, none of that stuff is tracked today. And the more I dug into it, it turns out that consent rates at some of these major institutions are as low as 25%. So 3/4 of people are saying, no, you cannot keep my sample. And the people that disproportionately say no are marginalized communities and patients of color. And that is the same picture here in the United States as it is in South Africa and other emerging areas around the world. And so trying to find ways to increase these consent rates and to increase transparency in research is perhaps the single biggest bottleneck in achieving precision medicine at scale. And so that's what we're building with AminoChain, is a system that lets people track what happens with their samples, see how they go, how they're used, let them learn of scientific insights generated from the use of their samples in research, and let them earn money back whenever these are commercialized and sold. And so the idea is, for me personally, I'd love to see a world created in which everybody could experience the same blind trust in biosample donation that I did when I was a patient.
Wow. First of all, thank you for explaining all that background and context behind, first of all, your childhood experience in healthcare, of course. And thankfully, you're able to recover from that well, obviously. But it just goes to show you how really awesome the healthcare system can be. I mean, they did that operation on you. You were basically cured and, you're on your way with your life. And now you're creating lots of value for the rest of society through AminoChain and other activities. So kudos to you for doing that and staying in the biology space. But then you talk about some of these problems, right? First of all, you said 75%, I guess, of people don't consent to giving their biosamples. Why do you think that is?
It's such a good question, right? I think it's, first of all, very institution dependent, right? So some major institutions, especially in very heterogeneous population areas like New York City, they experience very low consent rates. Other places actually have very high consent rates, but there you tend to have very homogenous people within the ecosystem. So for example, in Austria or in Germany, consent rates are actually very high, but their trust in the medical research system is also very high. So the understanding there for patients is that if my physician comes up to me and says, I need this done, there's no way I'm going to think that I know more than them, because they're this revered doctor. Of course, I'm going to do whatever they tell me to do. Whereas in the United States, we've had a lot of, atrocities, bioethical atrocities, breaches of trust that have contributed towards this narrative of dividing the bridge of respect between patients and researchers. And so, we have the Henrietta Lacks case, of course, in the early 1950s, but since then, there have been many others, like Moore versus the state of California. There's been the Havasupai tribe versus Arizona State. Be happy to touch on any one of those in more detail if you like. But the idea is, time and time again, people are consented into research, and later they find out that whatever they were consented into research for isn't actually upheld. These samples are used more often than once. They contradict previous beliefs. And every single time, these breaches of trust further the divide between human research participants and researchers themselves. And so today we have some major institutions with very low consent rates, and we desperately need new tools to build that trust between researchers and patients.
Right. And so the hypothesis here is that building this new sort of network on the blockchain, new biobanking network on the blockchain, will increase the trust, the transparency of transactions among, the vendors, the patients, researchers, everyone in between. And then by doing so, you'll increase, hopefully, the rate of consent amongst the population. This way, increasing research, creating a more diverse research data set, I think, which is really important. As you mentioned, most of the populations that do share are willing to consent. They're coming from homogenous populations, so you don't really get that true population, public health sort of understanding of what's going on out there in the real world. So it totally makes sense. So let's kind of dive into, just for the audience's sake, like when we talk about biosample, we could talk about blood, organ tissue. Give me all the examples or many examples of biosample, just so we can really understand the breadth of what can be collected here.
Yeah, that's a really good point as well. So like you mentioned, there's many different types of biosamples out there. And the very important thing to note is that each biosample, each section of biosamples has its own distinct value chain and its own distinct economics, right? So the idea of blood donation is very different from the idea of population genomics, which is just saliva swabs, which is also very different from the world of organ donation, which is different from the world of sperm and eggs, which is different from the world of cancer tissue and other disease samples, right? All of these are, you could see them as subsections of biosample donation and biobanking. And where we are currently operating right now, first and foremost, is the world of diseased tissue. So that effectively means most often cancer samples, but you also get neurodegenerative samples and other types, right? The reason why we're focusing on that is because all of these samples originate in hospitals, right? They all start with a surgery where people are going to cut them out and then ask them to be used in research. That's a very different notion from, focusing on the world of blood donation, for example, because then you and I and everybody on the street would be a target customer or somebody that we want to go after, right? Right now, we're just focusing on patients, right? And what actually happens with patients and how their samples used in preclinical research assays and how those used in translational medicine. But the world that we want to build thereafter is effectively a blockchain protocol that can be used for tracking all sorts of pregnancy. So that means we could also go into the world of what you call allogeneic donations, stuff like blood and stem cells, and then also into the world of population genomics, organs, and fertility as well.
So I'm going to dive more into the technology stack behind AminoChain. I'm going to ask questions around that. But before we get into that, I kind of want to just make sure the audience really understands like the importance of this sort of project. So can you elaborate a little bit more on AminoChain's platform and how it actually enhances this transparency and trust between the donors and researchers? What does that mean?
Yeah, it's a really good point. So effectively what AminoChain is and the tech stack as it exists today is we have built a distributed node architecture. So we go to these biobanks, these hospitals, these pharma companies, and we give them a SaaS product. We say, install this software, run it on your servers. And what does this get you? It is your bridge into a Web3 connected ecosystem on which there are hundreds of applications that you can benefit from. The first one is a biosample marketplace. So, and that's called the Specimen Center. So how it works is we go to these biobanks, we tell them to install this software. The software integrates it into their tech stack via a bunch of APIs. These APIs connect via adapters into on-chain contracts. And so effectively this node software is abstracting away a protocol blockchain infrastructure that connects the institution with everybody else that's also running a node. So now all of these biobanks are connected by the node protocol infrastructure. Donated samples are pulled and turned into NFTs, and we effectively create a peer-to-peer NFT marketplace of cancer tissue. And now, why is that good? Because anybody can log on. They can look for samples across an entire network of biobanks. They can streamline acquisition and licensing of those samples in a peer-to-peer fashion. And the best part of all of this is that the patients that donate their samples are able to track where they go throughout the network. They can see how they are used. They can stay connected for the outcomes of research. So they can be enrolled into clinical trials. The researchers can benefit from real-world evidence. And of course, we can enable royalties to be paid back to the researchers whenever their samples or their data is commercialized. And so with this system, we have embedded transparency and embedded benefit sharing for the research participants. And that's key because then we have a sustainable way for people to want to donate more. And then we increase the consent rate. So we get more rare samples, draw more researchers to the marketplace, and then kick off this really beautiful bioethical flywheel that effectively translates scientific research faster.
Yeah, no, I totally follow what you're saying, and I want to kind of make sure the audience does as well. So I'm reading this book by Chris Dixon, Read, Write, Own. You might have heard of it. And this concept of introducing the ability to own data on a native internet layer is going to transform, well, at least I think, and you think, transform the way we interact with each other. So this like new ability, which blockchain does enable, is very important for people to understand. So I'm super excited for that ability. A couple questions. Just how many nodes have been installed already? Like how big is the network now?
We have a non-trivial number of nodes that are currently integrated across a number of biobanks in Northern America, in Europe, and in Australia. We have around 6 figures of biosamples currently on the marketplace, and I don't share too much of the direct numbers, but we have a large network of pharma customers and of NIH-based researchers, academic researchers as well, actively requesting and transacting on samples in the marketplace. And we have just closed our seed round, and so we're now in the initial stages of growth where we're growing the protocol infrastructure and the samples being tracked.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk a little bit about that actually. Can you discuss like the significance of the recent $5 million seed funding that you received led by Andreessen Horowitz?
Yeah, absolutely. So around this time last year, we were accepted into the CSX program, which is the Andreessen Horowitz crypto accelerator that partook earlier this year in London. And so off the back of getting into that program, we closed a $2 million pre-seed round and got into the accelerator, partook in that earlier this year in the spring. We moved the needle very well. We fleshed out an MVP into a more functioning platform that a bunch of biobanks were brought onto. And as our network grew and we sort of de-risked some of the initial assumptions that we have within what we were building, we were then one of 2 companies to receive the follow-on funding off the back of the accelerator and formally join the A16Z crypto portfolio. And so A16Z then led our seed round this summer. That was a $5 million seed round. And the second largest investor that came in was a fund called Sukarno. And Sukarno is the family office of Paul Allen, the Microsoft founder. And why we think they're fantastic is because Paul Allen founded something called the Allen Institute, which is one of the biggest brain cancer research institutes over in Seattle. And so by virtue of having them on the cap table as well, they're a fantastic strategic partner into tracking the world of biosamples and glioblastoma samples, specifically within the Seattle ecosystem.
That makes a lot of sense. This is really tracking because you have a background in neuroscience or you've studied neuroscience. Your partner, Dr. Jelani Clark, also is a neuroimmunologist who I've interviewed on this show in the past as well. And so it really makes sense that Paul Allen and this Brain Institute is invested in this company. Do you see sort of brain samples as part of the roadmap for that reason for your company?
Yeah, certainly. We in many ways sample agnostic with the caveat that we're focusing right now on disease tissue. So all the samples need to start within hospitals, right? But that in and of itself is already a little bit of the sub-segment of the world of biosamples as a whole. And so if you look roughly at, what type of samples are being donated today, the vast majority of those tend to be cancer tissue, as in like oncology samples. And neurodegenerative tissue, we could also focus on, but right now we're mostly focusing on cancer as a whole, and hence brain cancer is one subsegment thereof, right? And so we are focusing on it, but we're also collecting a bunch of other samples as well.
So this all sounds really great. And I really believe that this sort of movement makes sense. And I think there's going to be a whole industry built around decentralized biobanking, essentially. But, given your experience, what are some of the challenges that you have experienced? And then what do you foresee as new challenges that are coming up for AminoChain and others in the space?
This is a great question. I think, the way AminoChain was started was just like, I'd finished my graduate degree at Columbia and I got into this program at Antler, and I was like, how the hell do you start something like this? It's just like the interest of blockchain and the world in which it could open, tracking biosamples. I had a bunch of ideas, but it was, for the longest time, just me in a WeWork by myself with a black coffee and my laptop thinking it's, me against the world of like, how do I actually achieve what is just in my daydreams every day? And the first step to all of this stuff is, Paul Graham would say, like, do things that don't scale. But for me, that was just follow your intuition, i.e. walk into a hospital and ask to speak to somebody. And I did that a bunch of times. Walked in, asked to see their consent documents, asked to speak to someone, sat down, interviewed them for an hour and said, cool, who else should I speak to? From there, you get 3 more connections, and then people introduce you to their manager or to another partner. You interview them, you find out more stuff, and then they introduce you to somebody else. This just happened time and time again. And the more like relentless you are and just pushing for finding out the initial things that you don't know and you need to know, that can become kind of addictive, right? And when you're sucked into that rabbit hole, then you know that you're onto the right track of actually building something. So it started off like that in the accelerator. That took me to go to a bunch of conferences. When I went to the conferences, I first sounded like an absolute madman, going to everybody talking about blockchain and like, how tracking stuff is on protocol infrastructures is the way to go and stuff. Everybody was like, who the hell is this kid and what's he talking about? But then the more and more we stayed at it, we actually found our first biobank that was willing to take a risk on us and to demonstrate the utility in a sort of MVP type fashion. From that, we could write a couple of papers. And once you have papers under your belt, you can then start to, let people digest what you're building in their own terms, and then grow the network a little bit further from the conferences that you go to and stuff. And so that's initially what happened with us, right? It was a big challenge at the beginning because nobody knew about this technology. Nobody knew about what it could achieve for them. But I think just staying on top of moving the needle every day a tiny bit, that's been incredibly effective for us. And now we've built up this huge reputation within the biobanking ecosystem as these blockchain kids that are doing something, next generation within our field of biobanking. And now we've slightly moved the energy towards, people being excited around what we're doing as opposed to scared. And that's a real shift for us, right? And as long as we can hold on to that and we just tap into that excitement, then this thing will snowball the way that we intend it to.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I think for every single person who is excited about an AminoChain, I'm sure there's another hospital or biobank that's still scared. So how would you advise, other startups in the healthcare DeSci space that are trying to leverage Web3? What would you advise them when approaching a potential customer or client or node or whatever sort of network participant you can say?
Yeah. Do your homework. I think that's like the key to me as well before. So like when you don't ever want to go in blind. You don't ever want to just like shake someone's hand and then you just seem curious from a cold start kind of position. People are always mind blown if you can go there and be up to speed about what they're doing, what their interests are, what kind of samples they bank, for example, what their consent mechanisms are, and how their institution is set up and stuff like that. And if you could get off that, that first initial impression of really impressing people, then you're forever framed in a way that people want you to succeed, right? As opposed to people thinking that you're there to disrupt them or steal their job. I mean, that was very, very effective for us. I went to all of these different conferences, booths on the ground, speaking with people. And the only time where I felt like it was a really successful conference or a, successful event was when the people said to me, wow, you really know your stuff. Or like, you've totally done your homework and researched us before you came and spoke to us. So for anybody getting out right now and starting all of this for the first time, I would highly recommend do your research, become as much of an expert as you can with publicly available information, before you go and speak with people, and then people will take you a lot more seriously when you first meet them.
Great advice. Appreciate that. How does AminoChain's partnership with the cloud limbs enhance the capabilities of your platform? So like what benefits does it bring to biosample donors?
Yeah, that's a great question. So Cloud Limbs is one of the major lab inventory management softwares out there in the market. There's roughly 35 other prominent big LIMS vendors within the biobanking space. And a lab inventory management software is effectively the tech stack that biobanks use to track their biosamples within the institution. You can set up different environments. You can make it customized to your workflow such that you could track things across labs. But mostly the things would actually track sample provenance from a single biobank, right? So these LIMS vendors are in hot contention with each other to gain market share and to track biosamples across the biobanking space within the United States and internationally. The problem with interoperability comes when you try to harmonize across these LIMS vendors, because they all have like individual tech stacks. It's the same kind of problem as trying to harmonize across Epic and Cerner. It's just that those are the two biggest electronic medical record providers, whereas there's roughly 35 LIMS vendors out there. So Cloud LIMS is one of the major ones, and they're phenomenal for us because we, A, get to use them as a sales channel to integrate into all the biobanks that they're currently tracking samples at. And B, they get to use us as a sales channel because the vast majority of biobanks actually can't afford a LIMS system. And so in the instances, whenever we find a biobank that's not tracking anything, i.e. they're only using Excel spreadsheets or they're tracking things on local environments, we can connect them with their Cloud LIMS so that they have a new customer that they could close as well. So it's a mutually beneficial partnership in which we can track samples on chain through this connected economy via their APIs, but then also we provide an opportunity to integrate with new biobanks that don't actually have LIMS systems just yet.
That's really cool. Can you describe AminoChain's tech stack and any future integration plans?
Yes. So the basics of it is what we sort of explained before, right? With this distributed node architecture. And right now we go to the biobanks, we connect via APIs, we pull that information, we mint NFTs, and then we have a peer-to-peer NFT marketplace. It's relatively simple in that way, right?
What's the protocol that you're leveraging, or what's the backbone or blockchain or L2 or yeah?
Yeah, we're currently built as an application on Polygon, and we are currently moving towards Optimism. And we'll currently keep building
Optimism.
Yeah, exactly. But the idea is right now we're expanding into this like single application, right? So it's like we're just doing one app to track what happens with biosamples in the marketplace kind of fashion. But the idea eventually is to turn what we're building into a protocol itself, right? And so if we can turn the AminoChain network into effectively the world's first HIPAA-compliant L2, where people can source data, they can build dApps on top, and all of this can be built with the patient first and foremost in mind, i.e. for real-world evidence or clinical recruitment or other patient-centric features and applications, then that is exactly what we want to build, right? It's a biobanking operating system in which people can build decentralized applications on top.
Interesting. Can you kind of talk through your thought process when selecting Polygon and choosing to go into Optimism? And I'm sure you've looked at different protocols and had to choose between speed and decentralization. Can you kind of talk me through that just a bit?
Yeah. So we were thinking, there's so many different, factors and levels that actually come into this. Initially, we were on Polygon just because it was the most affordable. Yeah. And that's where we got started, and that's what our developers most wanted to work on. But now we eventually, we hit a few problems with speed, and it's actually not as affordable as it once was. And so now we're moving towards Optimism. And so we just currently want to expand as, that as our L2 of choice. That's the first thing. And the second thing is that we wanted an EVM compatible network, right? So I think the main thing was that Ethereum is going to be around for the longest time, and something that uses Ethereum as a sort of settlement layer or an L2 based on Ethereum, that would be the most effective thing for our long-term architecture. Those are the two main factors that we thought of.
Any future plans with other similar to Cloud LIMS or another software provider that is already in the biobanking industry?
We have a bunch. Yeah, exactly. So a bunch of conversations ongoing, but I don't think any of them are formal enough yet to share or to allude to just yet. But if we have the same conversation in a few months' time, I'm sure we could share a lot more exciting stuff.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So how does AminoChain, talk about privacy compliance, a little different regulatory subject, but one thing that's super important is this protection of patient privacy, HIPAA, GDPR, person privacy, I guess you can call it. So how does AminoChain address those?
Yeah. So the way that we are expanding our network infrastructure right now, there are roughly 2,500 biobanks within the United States. And there's up to 200 million biosamples across all of those biobanks. That's what we've sized so far. Under federal regulations, under 45 CFR Part 46, you can de-identify these retrospective collections, and then you don't have to reconsent the patients for secondary research use. So that's, in my personal view, a terrible federal regulation. And that's the way the world exists today. So basically, the lowest hanging fruit to grow out this infrastructure is to go to all of these biobanks, to de-identify their collections, and to list them onto a peer-to-peer marketplace to get people to distribute them and use them within research. And so that's what we're currently doing right now. We're going towards all these biobanks, de-identifying their collections, getting them distributed. Once we have this marketplace infrastructure set up, something that researchers enjoy using, something that streamlines acquisition and licensing of biosamples, we then want to integrate compliance into the protocol infrastructure that we build. And we have a bunch of ideas in which how we want to do that. Most recently exploring combination of ZK proofs and homomorphic encryption. But the idea would be that data is always kept self-custodial at the data source. So that could stay within your Epic records or it could stay at the biobank. But we effectively have a network of hooks across the whole ecosystem to provide proofs around data provenance, around data itself. And through that, we're able to achieve compliance on many different levels. There's that. And there's also other people within the DeSci space that are building compliance engines using blockchain. And we're in partnership discussions with them, perhaps to maybe leverage their technology to achieve compliance in the initial stages.
Very cool. Yeah, I'm a huge fan of ZK, zero knowledge proofs, and this concept. I think it's actually going to be the killer app that'll make blockchain valuable in the world eventually. One thing you mentioned is you're working to help these biobanks de-identify the data and information. But one challenge that's always come up is if it's a biosample, someone can still genotype that biosample and identify the person's DNA, which is very unique to the person. So that's another challenge that I don't think you need to answer that right now because it's sort of like, a worldwide problem, but something that I'm always thinking about. How do we address those kind of issues?
It's a really great point, right? Because I think, HIPAA as a regulation within itself, it was created in the 1990s as a way to de-identify, pharmaceutical prescriptions, like the receipts that pharmacies would sell, right? So like these pharmacies had all this data on people coming in and, getting in their prescriptions and selling drugs. And companies wanted to get that data because they wanted to see who's buying what drugs. And so the idea of HIPAA was that, okay, you're allowed to resell this data, but don't include Ray's name, his email address, his social security, his zip code, whatever. Remove these 18 identifiable markers. And then effectively the data set is de-identified, and then you're allowed to sell it and do whatever you want with it, right? So that came up in the 90s. But at the same time in the 90s was the Human Genome Project, right? Like you spent billions to sequence the whole genome. Now you can sequence the whole genome for like $300 in a matter of hours or a matter of days. And that's a dangerous world to live in with the same regulations that we have, because things will just become very easily re-identifiable. And so in the near future, we could perhaps see some sort of healthcare regulation, some privacy regulation that's similar to what exists in Europe, right? Some sort of GDPR standard, or something even more stringent that could only be achieved with some sort of blockchain-based protection. And if either of those things come true within the next, election cycle, where the whole world's going to change anyway, it could be a very exciting time to be building in the DeSci space.
Yeah, no, I'm super excited. This is the greatest time to be alive. I think many would agree here. A couple more questions, then we can sort of wrap up. What are your long-term goals for AminoChain? How do you envision its impact on the future of biomedical research and patient engagement?
Yeah, that's a really good point as well. I think there's so many things that we want AminoChain to be, but effectively in creating this protocol infrastructure that connects these hospitals, biobanks, and pharma companies, we want to build an entirely new on-chain bioeconomy. We want to create a world in which 5 years' time, a hospital, a biobank, or a pharma company is missing out on 30% of their bottom line revenue because they're not running a node in the network. right? And that's simply just because you can use this as a way to connect with hundreds of applications for clinical recruitment. You can connect hundreds of applications for real world evidence. You can connect it for hundreds of ways of doing federated learning, decentralized AI. And effectively, this is your route into the whole DeSci ecosystem. AminoChain is like your connected node to understand what's happening, within the products that you build, but then also every single other DeSci project that's out there, right? In many ways, you could think of us as trying to be the Coinbase of scientific research, right? The ones that they trust and understand, they can leverage to connect to the broader DeSci ecosystem. But what that actually means for the patients, I think, is the most exciting part, right? Because today, patients donate samples and data, they give it, they sign a piece of paper, and it's gone forever. They have no equitable benefit. And it's insane because those samples that are taken, used in research, people find insights, and then they spend 4 years trying to find patients with these markers that they've just identified. But they just did research on somebody's tissue and they know that they have those markers. You should be able to enroll the person straight away, right? And decentralism can achieve that. And I think that's the kind of world that we want to build, right? We want the patients to be able to benefit straight away from having participate within scientific research.
Totally agree. There's such a huge disconnect. The data is out there, and we just need to make sure it's bridged or connected in a way that's responsible, ethical, I would say. So 2025, what are you looking forward to? What are you seeing? What's your outlook look like?
So in this next year, I think everything's going to change. We've seen a huge shift within the crypto industry. We've seen a huge narrative change around decentralized science. We're back in many ways. Unfortunately, there's not the correct guardrails in place right now. So we still have a lot of the nefarious blockchain activity taking off, a lot of meme coins being launched, and a lot of people losing their money, which of course always taints the real innovations happening in the industry. But hopefully within the next couple of quarters, we'll see some better guidance around how to incorporate blockchain-based companies, how to be regulated with the SEC around state regulations around launching tokens and having tokenomic models. And all of those things mean that we can actually build real world products for people leveraging blockchain technology. And so I think the next year is going to be critical because people are getting more excited around what's going on. So the understanding of what we're doing is going to pick up a little bit. And B, we'll see the initial stages of guardrails being set up as to how to do all these things effectively. So we're not, of course, no one's going to, achieve the end of the roadmap in the next year itself. But 2025 is going to be very key because we're going to be learning, building, and iterating directly based on what the government is releasing as their guidance. And so I think it's an exciting time to build, and every day is going to be a new adventure for the next year.
Is there any announcement around AminoChain token, or is that still being developed, discussed? I know it's a lot of work to think about the governance and tokenomics behind the project. So just curious if there's anything you could share there.
Yes. So we have absolutely no plans to launch a token in the near or immediate future, maybe not even in the immediate term. We think that launching a token pre-product market fit is dangerous, and it's one surefire way to kill your protocol and to lose credibility. And again, if you try to compare us to like Coinbase, for example, Coinbase did 10 plus years of really unsexy work, just getting regulated, doing a lot of paper filing, becoming accredited with every single one of their customers and auditors and whatever they had to do to then, survive the people that didn't do that, right? Like FTX and Binance and everybody else that did things a little bit more dangerously, right? So we want to play by the book. We want to do things in our own time, and we want to make sure people really trust the technology and the applications that we're building. And you can achieve decentralized dApps without launching your own token straight away. You can do that with stable coins. You can leverage existing tokens out there. And I think, promising people speculative assets before we really nail down our product market fit is one way in which we could, hamstring ourselves in achieving our vision before we're even halfway there. And so we will only launch a token if and when there's a beautifully elegant solution to it. There's a phenomenal use case, and it's something that could really benefit the vision of what we're trying to build.
Yeah, having seen so many projects come and go, I think that's very wise, and I admire your patience and diligence around that. It's super important to get that tokenomics right if you have a token at all. It's very cool. And a few more kind of hot fire quick questions. What's the most influential book you've read recently or in the past?
one I've just got right here. Hard Thing About Hard Things by Ben Horowitz. I just recently finished it, and anybody starting out on their startup journey, got to read it. It's a handbook of all the things that have gone wrong. It gives you direct answers on how to deal with it, or things that you don't know are about to go wrong, so you can anticipate what to do. It's phenomenal.
Got to learn from other people's mistakes. I totally agree there. That's great.
Yeah.
What is your favorite way to stay physically active?
I just did my first half Ironman a couple of weeks ago.
Awesome.
So that was pretty cool. It was my first time in Mexico as well. And I went to Puerto Vallarta. It was incredible. And yeah, that's what I've been doing over the last 4 months. I've been training up towards this big lofty goal that's many months away. So cycling, swimming, and running every day. And now most recently actually achieved it. And so I'm actually on a little bit of a break over the last couple of weeks, but I think I'll do that again in 9 months, set up another big lofty goal.
Congrats on that. I appreciate that. Well, Caspar, I really appreciate this conversation. I think we talked a great deal about biobanking, AminoChain, the future of blockchain and DeSci. What's the best way for people to reach you?
Best way for people to reach me, I'm available on X. So handle is at Casper Barnes 123. Available on LinkedIn. Handle is also just Casper Barnes, able to be connected at any point. Telegram is at Casper Barnes, open to DMs, open to collaborating, and excited to hear from people interested in the world of decentralized biobanking.
I love that. Awesome. We hope today's conversation inspired you to think critically about the future of health innovation and the role we can all play in building systems that prioritize trust, transparency, and efficiency. Don't forget to subscribe, share, and leave a review to help us reach more listeners passionate about revolutionizing healthcare. Until next time, stay healthy, stay innovative, and stay unchained. Caspar, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Ray. It's been awesome.
Hey everyone, we would greatly appreciate it if you can take a moment to share your thoughts about the show by writing a review and rating the show on your podcast platform. Your feedback helps us reach a wider audience and enhance the overall quality of the show. Don't forget to encourage your friends, mentors, teams, and students to tune in and subscribe as well. Thank you for your support. Check out healthunchained.org and subscribe to the show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and wherever else you enjoy podcasts. Join the premium Health Unchained Supercast community by going to healthunchained.supercast.com, which gets you access to ad-free episodes, and join the official Telegram community group for the latest updates.